"I'll take the one no one wanted," the rancher said. And what happened next would cost him everything he had left to lose. The marriage broker laughed. The whole town on that boardwalk turned to look. They expected a man like Wesley Doan to take back his words the moment he got a good look at the woman standing apart from the rest. A half-Apache outcast the broker had tried to hide at the end of the line. The 3 other men had already walked past without a second glance. But Wesley did not take his words back. He meant them, and by the time hired guns arrived in the Arizona Territory that summer of 1883 to drag Sahar away in chains and collect a bounty on her head, Wesley Doan would find out exactly what kind of man he was willing to be. This is their story. Watch it till the end, and if it moves you, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's go back to where it started. The summer of 1883 had been brutal in the high desert country north of the copper mines. The sun had a quality that year of pressing down on everything. The hardpan, the mesquite, the rooftops of the little town of Harrow Creek, like a flat hand. Cattle lost weight standing still. The water in the creek that gave the town its name ran thin and brownish over pale rocks. Men argued more than usual at the saloon, and the arguments had a tired edge to them, the way exhausted people argue, without any real hope of winning. Wesley Doan had been in that country 3 years. He ran about 400 head of merino sheep on a spread 12 miles southeast of town, and he kept maybe 60 cattle on the eastern pasture for the meat. He was 34, quiet in the manner of men who have learned that most of what you say out loud changes nothing. He had a scar along his left jaw from a disagreement that ended badly for everyone involved, and he wore it the way he wore his hat, without thinking about it much. He had come to Arizona from New Mexico after his wife Clara died of a fever in the spring of 1880. They had been married 4 years. He had built her a good house with 2 proper windows and a wood floor, and after she was gone he kept the house clean out of a habit he did not know how to break. He cooked for himself. He did not drink to excess. On winter nights he sat by the fire and read whatever books he could get from the freight wagon, history mostly, sometimes surveying texts, sometimes nothing in particular, just words on a page to keep his mind from going somewhere he did not want it to go. He had not planned to send for a bride. His neighbor to the north, a copper-faced Scotsman named Angus Rayburn, had mentioned the marriage agency in Phoenix, M. Heathcote and Associates, brokers of honorable matrimony, with the careful enthusiasm of a man who wants to plant a seed without appearing to plant it. Rayburn's own wife had come that way 2 years prior, a sturdy woman from Missouri who had turned Rayburn's chaotic household into something resembling order. The man was visibly happy in a way that embarrassed him slightly, which Wesley found touching. So Wesley had written a letter. He kept it short. He described the ranch and the house and his financial situation honestly, without exaggeration. He mentioned that he had been widowed, and that he was not a man given to cruelty or drink. He said he was looking for a woman who wanted to build something real in a hard country, and that he would do his honest best by her. He sealed the envelope and mailed it and did not think about it again for 2 months. The reply from M. Heathcote came with a photograph and a short biography of a woman named Constance. Wesley wrote back that he would come to Harrow Creek on the 22nd of August, when the broker's stage was due to arrive with the prospective brides. He did not feel excitement exactly. He felt the way a man feels when he has finally decided to fix a fence he has been walking past for a year. Something that needed doing would get done. The stage arrived in Harrow Creek on a Wednesday afternoon with the sun still high and punishing. Wesley had ridden in the night before and slept at the boarding house. He stood on the boardwalk across from the hotel and watched the women step down from the coach. One by one there were 6 of them. 5 stepped down in a group, greeting the broker's man with practiced smiles, smoothing their dresses, looking at the town with the careful eyes of women sizing up what they were getting into. The 6th came last. She had been sitting at the far end of the coach, apart from the others, and she came down the steps slowly, the way a person does when they expect to be stared at and have decided not to hurry on account of it. She was maybe 25, dark-haired, carrying a small cloth bag. Her coloring was not the coloring of the other women. Her face held the particular stillness you see in people who have learned to give away as little as possible. Wesley did not know her name yet. What he noticed first was that she stood about 3 feet from the nearest woman, and that nobody on the boardwalk spoke to her. The other brides clustered near the hotel door. 3 men who had come to look over the arrivals moved down the line and stopped short of her entirely, like water parting around a stone. M. Heathcote himself was a small man with a wide mustache and a hat that had been expensive once. He came to Wesley with the energy of someone who wanted to move the transaction along before anyone changed their mind. "Mr. Doan, the women have arrived, as you can see. We have several fine prospects. Allow me to make introductions." He steered Wesley toward the group by the hotel door. "Miss Margaret Holloway, originally of Cincinnati, very accomplished. Miss Priscilla Fane, formerly of Kansas City, experienced in the domestic arts. Miss Agnes—" Wesley was not quite listening. He was watching the woman standing alone at the end of the boardwalk. She had set her bag down by her feet, and she was looking at the street with an expression that was hard to read, not sad exactly, not frightened exactly, more like someone who has already done the arithmetic on a situation and accepted the answer. "Who is she?" Wesley asked. Heathcote's mustache shifted. "That is Miss Sahar Rios. She is not— I would not recommend her for your purposes, Mr. Doan. She is a rather unusual case. Her mother was a woman of the White Mountain Apache band, who was taken into a Mexican household as a servant. The circumstances are somewhat irregular. Miss Sahar was born in the Sonita Valley and has lived largely on the frontier. She speaks English well enough, but her background is not what most of our clients are looking for. I mention her only for completeness." "Send her over," Wesley said. "Mr. Doan, send her over." Heathcote sent her over. She walked across the boardwalk without hurrying. Up close, she was a striking woman, high-cheeked, dark-eyed, with a quality of self-possession that Wesley recognized, because he had it too, the kind that comes not from confidence exactly, but from having been through something and come out the other side. She looked at him the way you look at a man when you are deciding how much of a fool he is. "Mr. Heathcote says you want to talk to me," she said. "Wesley Doan," he said. "I have a sheep and cattle ranch 12 miles southeast. I wrote the agency for a wife who could handle a hard country, and meant it. You look like you can handle a hard country." She did not smile. "I have a history that will make people hostile to you." "Most histories do," he said. She looked at him a long moment. Behind her, one of the women by the hotel door had whispered something to the woman beside her, and both of them had glanced over with the particular expression of people who considered themselves to be bearing witness to something scandalous. "I'll take the one no one wanted," Wesley said, directing the words at Heathcote, who had drifted close again. Then he looked back at Sahar. "If she'll have me," she said. "We should be clear that I do not know you." "Neither did the others," he said. A pause. Something moved behind her eyes, too quick to name. "All right," she said. They were married the following morning at the office of the Harrow Creek Justice of the Peace, a man named Cofield, who was also the town assayer, and who seemed to find the whole business privately amusing. The ceremony took 9 minutes. Wesley signed the register. Sahar signed it below him in a careful, educated hand. Cofield shook Wesley's hand and nodded at Sahar with the minimal courtesy of a man getting through his duties. They loaded her bag into the wagon bed and rode out of Harrow Creek by mid-morning. For the first half-hour neither of them spoke. The wagon rolled through the scrub brush, and the heat shimmered off the rocks, and a pair of ravens followed them for a while on fence posts, before losing interest. Wesley drove with his wrists on his knees. Sahar sat beside him on the bench with her hands folded in her lap and watched the country. "Your sheep?" she said eventually. "Merinos," he looked over. "Yes. White Mountain country has good grazing if you move them in September. My mother's people knew every canyon for 40 miles. The sheep ranchers who lasted were the ones who learned that." Wesley said, "I've been going west into the Pinals." "Should have been going north," she agreed. That was the first real thing they said to each other. It wasn't much, but it was something. The ranch house was clean, as Wesley had promised himself he would keep it. 2 windows, a wood floor, a kitchen with a proper stove, a bedroom, and a small room off the back that he had cleared out and furnished with a cot and a lamp for her to sleep in. He carried her bag inside and set it on the cot. She stood in the doorway of the small room and looked at it without saying anything. Then she went to the window and looked at the pasture behind the house and the line of cottonwoods along the dry creek bed. "It's a good house," she said. "Needs a garden," he said from the doorway. "Been meaning to put one in." She nodded once, still looking at the pasture. He left her to settle and went out to check on the flock. That evening he made supper, a mutton stew with dried onion and salt, not good enough to be proud of, but better than nothing. She came to the table and ate without complaint, and when she was done she cleared the bowls and washed them in the basin without being asked. He found, going to bed that night, that the house did not feel quite as empty as it had. That was something. Not much, maybe, but something Sahar did not trust easily. That was clear from the first days. She was not cold exactly, but she was careful the way you are careful around a thing that has hurt you before. She rose before dawn, and she worked without being directed, which Wesley gathered was as much about needing to stay busy as about industry. She swept the floor. She repaired a section of the garden fence with wire she found in the barn, and began turning the soil in the plot beside the south wall. She found the herbs he had planted once and neglected, the ones Clara had put in that first spring, and she did not touch them, which told him she had noticed what they were. The first time he said Clara's name aloud. She had been at the stove, and she had gone still for just a moment. Not flinched, just stilled. She put in the sage, he said, and the rosemary. I kept watering them out of habit. Sahar looked at the herbs. They're doing fine, she said. He did not say anything else about Clara for a while after that. It was not a warm arrangement those first 2 weeks. They ate together, and they worked in the same spaces and sometimes passed each other in the yard without speaking. But it was not unfriendly either. Wesley had lived alone long enough to be comfortable with silence, and Sahar seemed to feel the same. One evening she was at the table reading a letter she had taken from her bag, and she did not put it away when he came in, which he took as a sign that she did not need to hide things from him. He made coffee and left a cup by her elbow without asking if she wanted it. She picked it up and drank it and did not comment, which was, in its way, its own kind of conversation. The trouble in town started in the second week. Wesley had ridden in for supplies, flour and ammunition, and a new length of rope. He was at the dry goods counter when Ike Branscomb, who ran the feed operation next door and fancied himself an important man in local affairs, came and stood beside him with the deliberate casualness of someone who has prepared what they are about to say. "Heard you brought home a squaw," Branscomb said. Wesley did not look up from his list. "Heard wrong," he said. "I brought home my wife. Half-Apache, they're saying. Mother was a renegade woman. They're saying a lot of things. Most of them aren't any concern of yours." Branscomb tried a different angle. "People in this town have families, Wesley, children. You start bringing that element in from the reservation." Wesley put his list down on the counter and looked at Branscomb directly. "She's not from a reservation, and she's not an element. She's a person with more sense than this conversation. You want to talk about something else? I'm happy to stand here all afternoon. You want to talk about my wife again? We're done." Branscomb left. The man behind the counter, Horace Finch, who was a decent enough sort, said nothing but filled Wesley's order without meeting his eyes. When Wesley got back to the ranch, he told Sahar about it plainly. No softening. She listened with her arms crossed, and an expression that said she had expected something like it. "Branscomb is the kind of man who only exists when other people are watching him," she said. "That's about right. He won't be the last." "No," Wesley said, "he won't." She looked at him then with something that was neither gratitude nor suspicion, but was somewhere between the two, a look that said she was revising her read on him and had not decided yet what the new number was. The days accumulated. September came, and the heat broke a little at night, and the mornings were clear and copper-colored, and smelled of creosote and something sweeter from the direction of the mountains. Sahar started the garden in earnest. She planted the way her mother had taught her, with a feel for spacing and water, and the particular needs of each plant, squashed between the corn so the big leaves kept the moisture in. Beans on a cane trellis that she built from cottonwood limbs she cut herself, with a small hand axe she kept sharp. Wesley watched her work from the fence sometimes, and said nothing, which she seemed to prefer. Once he went and took the axe to the limbs she was struggling with, and she let him, which was the beginning of something, though neither of them would have called it that at the time. She had a knife. He had noticed it the first night, a short-bladed knife in a beaded sheath that she kept on the windowsill beside her cot, where she could reach it in the dark. He did not remark on it. It was a reasonable thing to have. She taught him some things about his own country. In late September, he took the sheep north toward the Pinals as she had suggested, following a route she described from memory, a route her mother's people had used, through a canyon with water in it, even at the dry end of summer. He found the water exactly where she said it would be, a small spring seeping from the base of a red rock face, enough to water 200 sheep and still run. He came back that evening with a particular quiet satisfaction on his face, and she looked up from the fire and saw it, and almost smiled. "I was right," she said. "You were right," he said. He made supper that night, and she sat by the fire while he worked, and at some point the silence between them had changed quality without either of them doing anything deliberate to change it. It was no longer the silence of two strangers sharing a space. It was something else. He could not have named it exactly. He thought about it for a while, and then he stopped thinking about it, and just let it be what it was. Toward the end of September, there was an accident with the sheep press. Wesley had been tamping wool into the frame when the wooden lever slipped and came down hard on his left forearm. It was not broken, but the bruise went deep and the arm swelled through the afternoon until he could barely close his hand around the water bucket. He did not say anything about it. He wrapped it himself with a strip of cloth and went back to work, which was the only response to injury that made sense to him. But Sahar noticed it at supper when he reached across the table, and his face did the thing faces do when they are hiding pain, the small flicker above the eyes. She set her fork down. "Let me see it," she said. "It's fine," he said. "Let me see it." He unwrapped it. The forearm was a dark greenish purple from the wrist to the middle of the muscle, with a hard knot at the center of the bruise. She looked at it for a moment, then went to the back room and came back with a small cloth pouch from her bag. She had dried something in it, a plant he didn't recognize, and she worked it into a paste with a little water from the basin. The smell was sharp and faintly medicinal, something between sage and pine pitch. "What is that?" he asked. "Osha root," she said, "for bruising and swelling. My mother always had it." She wrapped his forearm in a compress of the paste and bound it with a strip of clean cloth. Her hands worked with the same careful attention she brought to everything, not rough and not overly gentle, just precise. He watched her face while she worked. She was concentrating, and in concentration her composed expression went away and left something younger, something that was just a person doing a thing they knew how to do. "Your mother taught you medicine," he said. "She taught me what her mother taught her," Sahar said, still working. "White Mountain women carry the plant knowledge. You don't write it down. You carry it." She tied off the bandage. "Keep it on through the night. The swelling will be down by morning." It was, mostly. He told her so. She nodded in the way she nodded at things she had already known would be true. He started asking her about the plants she knew. Not all at once, not as a formal question, but as things came up. She was generous with it and specific. She knew the sotol and when to harvest it. She knew which prickly pear was best for a poultice and which variety her people used to make a drink for fever. She knew a half-dozen things that grew in the canyon bottom that he had been walking past for 3 years without knowing they had a use. The knowing was not just book knowledge or practical knowledge, but something that ran through both, an understanding of the country that was old in a way that his own understanding, real as it was not. "My mother said the land tells you what it has to offer," Sahar told him one afternoon, working in the garden. "Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman," he said. Sahar was quiet for a moment, pressing a seed into the soil. "She was," she said. "She had no reason to be kind, and she was anyway. I've thought a lot about that, what it cost, to stay kind when the world hasn't been kind back." He thought about Clara, who had also been kind, and how much it had cost her nothing, because kindness had been as natural to her as breathing. And he thought that Sahar's mother's kindness, hard-won and deliberate, was a different and perhaps rarer thing. He didn't say any of that. He picked up the spare trowel and helped with the planting, which was more useful. She stopped sleeping with the knife on the windowsill, sometime in early October. He noticed it was gone from the sill one morning and was not going to say anything, but she caught him noticing. "I know where you are in the house," she said. "I can tell by the sound you move the same way every night." "Habit," he said. "So is this," she said, and did not explain further. She didn't need to. She had told him parts of her history by then, not all of it, but parts. Her mother, Luciana, had been from the White Mountain Band taken by a Mexican landowner named Rios, in her 20s under circumstances that were not freely chosen. She had lived in the Rios household in the Sonita Valley, and eventually Rios had married her in a church ceremony, which was unusual, and which gave Sahar a legal standing that her mother had understood was important. Luciana had taught Sahar-Apache, the White Mountain dialect, and also Spanish, and Sahar had learned English from the mission school at Tucson. She read well and thought fast and had a quality of stillness that covered a great deal. Rios had died when Sahar was 17. He had left the property to his legitimate children from a prior marriage, and left Luciana and Sahar with the church record of the marriage, some money, and a mule. Luciana had died 2 years later of a fever, and after that, Sahar had been on her own. She did not say any of this with self-pity. She said it the way you describe the weather in a country you know well, accurately, and without extra feeling. Wesley listened and did not offer comfort she had not asked for, which she seemed to appreciate more than comfort would have been. "A man named Harlan claims a debt from my mother's time," she said one evening. They were by the fire, the air outside gone cool, and the coyotes sounding off in the distance. He had papers, he said. A loan Rios took from him, secured against the household and the people in it. He said my mother was included. He said I was included. Wesley looked at her. "Debts don't transfer to people," he said. "He believes they do," she said. "Or he pretends to. Where does this operate?" "Willcox, mostly. He has a cattle operation outside of town. He is not a man who takes no for an answer." "When did he last contact you?" She was quiet for a moment. 6 months ago. I had been in Tucson. He sent a man with papers, and I left Tucson and came to Phoenix and wrote to the agency." She looked at the fire. "I thought that a married woman with a legal husband in a known location would be harder to take than a woman alone." Wesley absorbed this. "You didn't come because of the advertisement," he said. "I came because of the advertisement," she said. "And because of that," he turned this over. Most women, even on the frontier, would have found a way to tell him this before the ceremony. But she had done the math on that, and decided she had to secure the arrangement before she could risk honesty. And he understood why, even if he did not love being the last to know. What she had not calculated on, or had not let herself believe yet, was that he was not the sort of man who would use a secret held back as a reason to put her out. "Coe's paper is false," Wesley said. "People aren't collateral. Territorial law is clear on that. Law and practice are different things out here," she said. "They are," he agreed. "But I know the territorial marshal and I know Judge Alcott in Tucson. A fraudulent debt claim on a married woman is an attack on her husband's household. That gives me legal standing Coe probably didn't count on." She looked at him for a long time, not with relief exactly, not yet, more with the careful attention of a woman who has learned that men who say things do not always do things. "You're not angry," she said. "I'm not happy," he said. "But angry at you doesn't help anything." She nodded once and said nothing else. Outside, the coyotes went quiet the way they do before something else moves in the dark. November brought the first cold. Wesley and Sahar had settled into the rhythms of the ranch in a way that had stopped feeling like two people performing a marriage, and started feeling, at least sometimes, like something with its own weight and logic. She helped him sort the wool he had put by from the late shearing. She had strong hands and a precise sense of quality, pulling the fibers apart and reading them with her fingers, the way you read print on a page. He watched her work and thought that he had not seen anyone handle fleece with that kind of attention since his father, who had run sheep in New Mexico in better years. She sang sometimes when she thought no one was near. He caught it twice, coming around the back of the house. A low sound in Apache, the kind of melody that doesn't resolve but circles. The same phrase repeated with small variations. He did not ask her about it. One evening she did ask him something, out of nowhere, the way her questions sometimes came, without prelude. "Do you know what the White Mountain people call the sheep?" He thought about it. "No," he said. She told him. He tried to repeat it. She listened with her arms crossed and the slight shift around her mouth that was as close as she got to open amusement. "Again," she said. He tried again. She shook her head. "The second syllable," she said. You're putting a hard stop on it. Listen." She said the word again. The sound she made in the middle of it was softer than anything in English, something made in the back of the throat without effort. He tried to match it, and got approximately half of it right. "Better," she said, which from Sahar was high praise. He started asking her for words, slowly, one at a time. The word for rain, which was long and had weather in it. The word for the particular red color the canyon walls went at dusk. The word for sheep. The word for a neighbor you trust, which was different from the word for a neighbor you don't. He kept them on a piece of paper he folded into his shirt pocket. She caught him looking at it once when they were out by the pasture fence, and did not say anything, but the shift around her mouth was there. "You're memorizing them," she said. "Trying to," he said. She looked at the pasture for a moment. "In White Mountain, if you learn enough of the language to name things, people say you've begun to see the country properly." She paused. "My mother believed that. That language was how you learned to see." "Your mother was right again," he said. She looked at him, and the shift became something fuller, something that for just a moment was a real smile, unguarded, the first one he had seen from her that was not almost. Then it was gone, and she was back to watching the pasture. But he had seen it, and it sat in him like something warm. They started eating together at the same time each evening. Without discussion, she took his coffee cup and refilled it without being asked. He repaired the rocker on the porch that had been broken since Clara's time, and left it by the south wall where the afternoon sun hit longest. And she took to sitting there in the last hour before dark, looking at the mountains. One evening he sat in the second chair, the one he'd brought out of the barn, and they watched the sun go down together without saying much. The mountains went through their colors, copper to red to purple, and the first stars came out over the eastern ridge. "My mother had a phrase," Sahar said. "In Apache, it means roughly that the mountains do not care who you are, and that is the closest thing to mercy you will find in this country." Wesley thought about that. "That's the most useful thing I've heard in a while," he said. She looked at him, and this time the thing behind her eyes stayed long enough for him to see it. "So are you," she said quietly. Then she looked back at the mountains, and the evening went on the way evenings do. He thought about that for a long time afterward, in the way you think about a thing you don't want to look at too directly, in case looking at it too directly makes it go away. In the third week of October, a letter arrived in Harrow Creek addressed to Wesley Doan. He picked it up when he rode in for supplies. It was not sealed particularly well, which meant Horace Finch at the dry goods counter, who also sorted the mail, had probably read it. Finch said nothing when he handed it over, but his eyes carried the expression of a man who has read something and wishes he hadn't. Wesley read it on the porch of the boarding house where he had tied his horse. The letter was from a man named Harlan Coe, written in the formal and slightly stilted language of someone who uses a lawyer's pen. It stated that Coe held a prior claim against a woman known as Sahar Rios, daughter of one Luciana, formerly of the Rios household, Sonota Valley. It stated that this claim predated any subsequent civil arrangement and was therefore not abridgable by marriage. It invited Wesley Doan to consider whether he wished to be in violation of a legitimate business matter. It was not a threat exactly, but it was not a threat. Wesley folded the letter and put it in his pocket and rode home. He told Sahar about it that evening. She read it herself once and handed it back. "He's testing whether you'll respond," she said. "I won't respond to him directly," Wesley said. "But I'm going to write to Judge Alcott in the morning." "Alcott will take time," she said. "Coe is not a patient man." "Then we'll be ready when he's not," Wesley said. She looked at him across the table with the flat, evaluating look she sometimes used when she was deciding something. Then she nodded, once, and that was that. He wrote to Alcott the next morning. The same morning he also had a long conversation with Angus Rayburn, who had ridden by on his way to Harrow Creek and stopped for water. Wesley told him, without going into the full detail, that there might be trouble from the direction of Willcox, and asked if Rayburn had any information about Harlan Coe. Rayburn pulled at his red beard. "Coe I've heard of," he said. "Ugly man. Not in appearance, in practice. Runs cattle on a lease that some people say should have reverted to territorial land 3 years ago. Man who crosses him tends to find his fences cut, or his water diverted, has 2 or 3 hired men on permanent wages who don't do cattle work. Rayburn looked at Wesley. You want me to keep an eye on the road? I'd appreciate it, Wesley said. Consider it done, Rayburn said. And Wesley, he paused, your wife is a good woman. My wife says so, and my wife is a better judge than me. Wesley said, tell her I said thank you. He went back to the house and he told Sahar about Rayburn's offer, and she received it with a quality of careful gratitude that told him she was not used to people outside a household being on her side. Rayburn doesn't know me, she said. He knows me, Wesley said, and he trusts my judgment. She was quiet. Then, that's its own kind of thing, she said, being trusted through someone else's trust. It's a start, he said. In the first week of November, 2 riders came to the ranch. Wesley was working on the fence line on the north pasture when he saw them on the ridge road. They rode at the purposeful medium pace of men who are not hurrying because they don't need to, and that unhurried quality told him something before they got close enough to make out their faces. He walked back toward the house. He went in through the kitchen door and picked up the Winchester from above the mantel and leaned it against the doorframe where he could reach it. Sahar came from the back room. She saw his face, and then she looked past him through the window, and she saw the riders on the ridge. She went still. Coe's men? He asked. Coe's men, she said. She did not look frightened, but something had changed in the way she was standing, the way an animal changes quality when it scents something it recognizes as dangerous. The tall one is Vic Prade. He was the one who came to Tucson. Go to the back room, Wesley said. There's a Colt in the box under the cot. Load it. She was already moving. The 2 riders came into the yard and stopped their horses and looked at the house with the professional patience of men who do their work for money and have no personal feeling about it either way. Wesley stepped out onto the porch with the Winchester held across his forearm, the barrel pointing down, which meant he was not yet pointing it at anyone, which was not the same as not being ready to. Help you, he said. Not a question. The tall one Prade had a long, pale face and the flat eyes of a man who had learned not to telegraph. Looking for a woman named Sahar Rios, he said. We have papers authorizing her return to her legal guardian, one Harlan Coe of Willcox, Arizona Territory. No such woman here, Wesley said. Prade looked at him. We have information that she is here, mister. Doan, Wesley said. Wesley Doan. This is my ranch. You're on my land. Mr. Doan, Prade's tone was even, the tone of a man who has had variations of this conversation many times. The woman in question has obligations that predate your arrangement with her. Mr. Coe's claim is prior. She's my wife, Wesley said. Legally married under the laws of the Arizona Territory. Whatever Coe told you he holds on her ended the day she signed that register. Prade glanced at the other man, who had said nothing. Something moved between them that was not quite a look, just a small adjustment. We'd like to speak with her directly, Prade said. She doesn't want to speak with you, Wesley said. And that's her right. Mr. Doan, you're on my land, Wesley said. You can ride off it, or I can help you off it. Those are the choices available. Prade looked at him for a long moment with those flat eyes. Then he looked at the Winchester and at Wesley's hands on it, which were not the hands of a man who is bluffing. We'll need to verify the marriage documents, Prade said. You can apply to the Harrow Creek Justice of the Peace, Wesley said. Name is Cofield. He's also the assayer, so he keeps regular hours. Ride carefully. Another long pause. The second rider had not spoken or moved the whole time, which Wesley noticed. The quiet ones were often the ones you had to watch. Prade pulled his horse around. We'll be back, he said. I'll be here, Wesley said. He watched them go up the ridge road until they were out of sight. Then he went back inside. Sahar was standing in the kitchen doorway with the Colt in her hand, hammer down, pointed at the floor. She had not gone to the back room at all. She had been standing 10 feet behind the door the whole time. He looked at the Colt, then at her. I said go to the back room, he said. You said load the Colt. She said, I loaded it. He was quiet for a moment. If it had gone wrong out there, there would have been 2 of them and 1 of you, she said. Now there would have been 2 of them and 2 of us. She looked at him with complete calm. I am not a woman who hides. He said nothing to that because there was nothing to say to it. He turned and went out and walked the perimeter of the yard and looked at the ridge road for a long time. They were not done, he knew that. He rode to Harrow Creek the next morning before dawn and sent a wire to Judge Alcott in Tucson, and another to the Territorial Marshal's office in Prescott. He laid it out plainly, a prior fraudulent debt claim against his legal wife, armed men on his property, the name Harlan Coe. He got back to the ranch by noon. Sahar was in the garden, pulling the last of the squash before the hard frost came. She looked up when he rode in, and he gave her a small nod that meant the wire had gone. She gave him the same nod back and went back to the squash. He spent the rest of that day going through the ranch with the eye of a man who is preparing for something. He moved the sheep into the closer pasture where he could watch them from the house. He found the shotgun he had not used in a year and cleaned it. He brought 2 extra boxes of cartridges in from the barn. He nailed the shutters on the west window so they could be closed from inside. Sahar watched all of this without comment. That evening she came to the kitchen while he was making supper and stood beside him at the stove and said, "I should go." He did not look up from what he was doing. "Where?" "Away, south. Cross into Sonora if I have to." "You're not going to Sonora," he said. "Coe will send more men. He'll send enough. You should not have to fight a war on account of my history." He put the spoon down and looked at her. She was watching him with the same composed face she had had on the boardwalk that first afternoon, the face that gave away as little as possible, but her hands on the counter edge were pressing down. "I married you," he said. "That means something to me. Maybe it doesn't mean the same thing everywhere, but out here it means I'm on your side. You didn't wander into my life. You're in it." She was very still. "You don't know me well enough to believe that," she said. "I know you well enough," he said. Her throat moved. She looked away and then looked back, and for a moment the composed face came apart just a little, not much, just enough to see that there was a great deal of feeling being held behind it. "No one has said that to me before," she said. "That I was in their life, that they were on my side." "Well," he said, "now one has." She pressed her lips together and nodded once. Quick. Then she took up the spoon and went back to stirring what was on the stove because she needed something to do with her hands. And he let her. Prade came back on the 6th day after the first visit, but he didn't come with 1 man this time. He came with 4. Wesley saw them from the sheep pasture, and he came in at a walk, not a run, because running told them something. He came into the kitchen and looked at Sahar and said, "5 riders. Get the colt." She already had it. They came into the yard in a line and stopped. Prade was in the center. The 4 men flanking him had the look of hired weight, bigger and less careful than Prade, the kind of men you bring when you're done talking. Wesley stood on the porch with the Winchester. Sahar came out and stood beside him, which he had not told her to do, but which, at this point, he was not surprised by. Prade looked at her with an expression that was the first human thing Wesley had seen on his face. Not anger exactly, more like the look of a man who finds an inconvenience irritating. "Mr. Doan," he said, "we're here to take the woman." "You're here to try," Wesley said. One of the flanking men moved his hand. Wesley put the rifle to his shoulder in one motion, and the man's hand stopped where it was. "I am a legal husband," Wesley said, "defending my legal wife on my legal property. Every man here who draws will answer for it." "That's not a threat. That's the law," Prade said. "Mr. Coe's claim is—" "Mr. Coe's claim is nothing," Sahar said. Her voice was level and clear and carried to every man in that yard. Prade looked at her and something shifted in his calculation. "Coe never held a legitimate debt on my mother," she said. "She was married in the Catholic Church in 1860. Her husband was Ernesto Rios, and when he died the estate passed to his blood children. Coe lent money to Rios against the cattle, not against my mother or against me. There is a record at the church in Sonita. There is a record at the Territorial Land Office. The document he showed you is a forgery." The 4 hired men were very still. Men like that, Wesley knew, did their work when the work was clear and simple. A woman who could name the forgery in 3 sentences with that level of confidence was not the simple job they had been paid for. Prade looked at Sahar for a long time. "I'll need to verify that," he said finally. "Verify it," she said. "Judge Alcott in Tucson has copies. The territorial marshal in Prescott has a wire about it as of 2 days ago. Verify all of it." Another long silence. One of the flanking men looked at Prade, and Prade did not look back at him. Wesley kept the rifle at his shoulder. "Mr. Coe will hear about this," Prade said. "Mr. Coe can come himself if he wants to discuss it," Wesley said, "and he can explain the forged papers to the marshal." Prade sat on his horse for one more long moment. Then he turned and rode, and his 4 men followed, and Wesley kept the rifle up until they were small on the ridge road, and then smaller and then gone. He lowered the Winchester. Beside him, Sahar let out a breath that was the first real unguarded thing he had seen from her since the day she had stepped off the stage. "You knew about the church record," he said. "I've known since I was 20, she said. "Coe knows about it, too. His forgery depends on no one asking the right questions. You let me send the wire to Alcott before you told me about the record," he said. "Not an accusation, just a statement." "I didn't know if you would stay," she said. "I wanted the wire sent before I risked telling you." He looked at her. "What would I have done with the knowledge? Thrown you out?" "Men have done less for a quieter life," she said. He thought about all the things he could say to that, and said none of them. "Next time you have something that matters," he said, "tell me." She looked at him for a moment. "Yes," she said. "All right." They went inside. 3 weeks later, a letter came from Judge Alcott's office in Tucson. Harlan Coe had presented his papers to the marshal's office, and the papers had been examined and found to be fraudulent. A warrant had been issued for Coe on charges of fraud and extortion. His cattle operation outside Willcox was under legal review. Alcott's letter recommended that Wesley Doan file a formal complaint in territorial court to formalize the dismissal of all claims against his wife. Wesley read the letter twice and passed it to Sahar, who read it with the same careful attention she brought to everything. When she was done, she folded it and set it on the table. "It's done," she agreed. She looked at the letter on the table and then out the window at the mountains, and something changed in her face in a way he had seen only a few times, a relaxing of something that had been held very tight for a very long time. "I haven't been safe in 4 years, she said. "Not the way this is." "You're safe now," he said. She looked at him, and there was something in her eyes that she let him see. Not the composed face, the one underneath. "I know," she said. December came to the Arizona Territory with cold nights and clear days, and the mountains white at the tops. The ranch was different that winter than the winters Wesley had known in it before. Not louder, not busier, not dramatically changed in any particular way you could point to. But the house was alive in a manner it had not been since Clara, and it was alive differently because Sahar was a different kind of person than Clara had been, harder in some places and stranger in others. And the life they had was the life they had actually made, not the one either of them had planned. She had started teaching him Apache words in the evenings, not as a lesson exactly, just giving them to him when they were useful. The word for sheep, the word for the color of the mountains at dusk, the word for the sound of the creek when it ran low in summer, which was a longer word than he expected, because in the White Mountain dialect, the words for water sounds were not simple nouns but small descriptions of the way the water moved. He was learning slowly and not always gracefully, and she found his mistakes funny in a way that she didn't bother to hide, a quick bright look that didn't quite become a smile, which he came to watch for in the same way you watch for a particular bird, patiently and with a good deal of private pleasure. One evening in the last days of December they were sitting by the fire after supper. The cold was real that night, pressing against the window glass, and the fire had been built up until it filled the room with a red-gold warmth. Sahar had her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, and she was looking at the fire. Wesley had been thinking about something for several weeks, and had not said it because he did not want to say it wrong. "I know this wasn't what either of us expected," he said. She did not look up from the fire. "No," she said, "but it's what we have," he said, "and I would rather have it honestly than the other way." She looked at him then. "I am not asking for anything you don't want to give," he said, "but I want you to know that what started as an arrangement isn't an arrangement to me anymore. It hasn't been for a while." She was quiet for a long moment, the way she was quiet when she was actually thinking and not just waiting for the other person to finish. "My mother used to say that trust is not given," she said. "It is grown, like corn, slowly in hard ground, and you can't make it go faster by wanting it to. That sounds about right, he said. She looked at the fire again. Then she reached across the distance between their chairs and put her hand over his, the way you put your hand over something you have decided to stop being careful about. It's been growing, she said, slowly, in hard ground. He turned his hand over and held hers, and the fire went on doing what fires do. And outside the cold was blue and clean against the December mountains, and inside the house was warm. He asked her in the spring, on an evening in April when the desert had done what it does in that brief green season, gone soft and improbable with color, the prickly pear in bloom and the air full of something sweet that you could not quite locate. He had no ring. He had been thinking about a ring, but he had the feeling that a ring was not the thing that mattered here. Sahar, he said. She looked up from the cane trellis she was repairing. She had a piece of wire in her hand, and her hair was loose in the way it came loose when she worked. I would like to stay married to you, he said. Not because of the papers, because I want to. I want you to know the difference. She looked at him for a moment with the mountains behind her and the bloom of the desert all around, and the evening light doing what it does in April, warm and full of color. I know the difference, she said. Then yes or no, he said, freely. She set the wire down and crossed the few feet between them and took his face in both her hands, the way her mother had said you held something you had decided to keep. Yes, she said, freely. It was not the marriage that either of them had imagined. He had imagined someone familiar, someone who fit the shape of the life he already knew. She had imagined, maybe, nothing at all, had learned young not to put herself in futures that might not exist. What they had was the life in front of them, the ranch and the sheep and the mountains and the garden and the fire and the evenings by the window, the slow-grown thing between two people who had both learned to live in hard ground and had between them learned to grow something in it that neither of them had expected. The town of Harrow Creek did not warm to them, not that winter, not the spring. Branscomb still found ways to make himself unpleasant. Some women crossed the street. Some men found reasons to do business elsewhere. But Wesley Doan had not lived his life by the good opinion of Harrow Creek, and he did not start that year. His wire to Alcott had made it around the community in the way that news makes its rounds. And more than one man who had shaken his head at the marriage found himself privately revising the calculation when the story of Prade and the 5 riders in the forged papers got out. A man who could hold off 5 hired guns and win by telegraph was not entirely contemptible. Regardless of who he married, and Sahar carried herself in the town the way she had always carried herself, straight-backed and even-eyed and quiet, which some people mistook for arrogance and others, the smarter ones, eventually understood was the particular dignity of a woman who has had enough taken from her that she will not let anything else go easily. Angus Rayburn came out in the spring and shook Wesley's hand and nodded at Sahar with the genuine courtesy of a man who means it. His wife invited Sahar to tea, which Sahar accepted, and after which she came home and told Wesley that Rayburn's wife was a woman of considerable good sense, who liked her whiskey straight and her opinions unmodified. And this was the most approval she had expressed for anyone in Harrow Creek since arriving. It was a life, not the one he had written to Phoenix about, not the one she had left Tucson to find. It was the one that had come from a choice made plainly on a boardwalk in August, a man saying he would take the one no one wanted, and finding that what no one else had wanted was in fact exactly what he needed. The mountains didn't care who you were, but she did, and he did, and that, in the Arizona Territory in the year of 1884, turned out to be enough.